Greetings and welcome to the Doom Boomer. I'm Conroy Pitt, and I do a bi-weekly or so look at some of the existential drama that could end us all. This week, we are going to head back to the Ukraine for the first time in a while. The Russian Federation has collapsed, and Putin is finished. It hasn't been finalized yet, of course, but the day's news is like the sound of coffin nails for Putin. Today, we learned that the Crimean bridge was partly destroyed, severing a jugular of the Russian forces in the Crimea. Humiliating military defeat after military defeat, crippling economic sanctions, turning Russia into a pariah state through war crimes. Even the threat of nuclear weapons seems hollow. Let's hope it stays that way. My prediction is that we will survive. If we're all nuked, nobody's going to be around to call me on that prediction, so I can say this with a degree of confidence. Over the past several weeks, Ukraine has launched a counteroffensive across eastern Ukraine and has recaptured much land, equipment, and ammunition. It has been so dramatic, a blitzkrieg, if you will, that the whole world is reeling in surprise as the exhausted Russian army and raw conscripts crumble like Russian cookies. Ukraine has gained tanks, artillery, and ammunition and is turning it on the fleeing Zeds. Putin has mobilized 300,000 troops, fully armed and motivated conscripts, but that's obviously not happening. Reports are that these conscripts are being snatched off the streets and sent to the front with no training and very little equipment. Many have already been killed or captured and seem to have added to Russia's collapse rather than slowing it down. Ukraine has set up a hotline to surrender and to get a bonus for bringing military hardware. Putin may go down as one of the most inept military rulers in history. It is hard to tell what's true and not true in the fog of war and the propaganda, but it's clear that Putin has blundered badly, and he's now mired in a proxy war with NATO that can only end in his destruction and the dissolution of the Russian Federation. Or perhaps Putin will go out in a blaze of glory and we all die. Either way, Russia under Putin is finished. There's no turning back from genocide. It may be time to consider what the world will look like without a Russian Federation. One good thing about being a boomer is you can remember stuff from a long time ago. I remember when the first Russian Federation, the Soviet Union, collapsed in 1991, and Russia is no Soviet Union. I never imagined the Soviet Union collapsing. Of course, I was quite young at the time and not as doomy, so I probably didn't really care, and it collapsed rather quickly. We may see the same happening with the Russian Federation. Within weeks of this invasion, some commentators predicted an eventual Russian collapse, especially once it became obvious that Vladimir Putin's special military operation was not going to be a quick victory. Some say such a collapse could happen by 2025 or 2027. The Doom Boomer is now officially saying Putin will be gone by January 2023. In 1991, the USSR collapsed into 15 republics. These became independent states, and many further became the Commonwealth of Independent States. Conflict with Chechnya escalated into the First Chechen War when Russian troops were deployed in December of 1994 into the Republic. There seems to be little love in the republics for Mother Russia. And I can only imagine they must be tired of feeding their children to the war machine. The main reason for the disintegration processes and the possible collapse of Russia, according to the chief researcher of the Institute of Philosophy, Russian Academy of Sciences, Vladimir Shevchenko, is the lack of a national idea or project such as communism in the Soviet Union that would unite all the peoples of Russia. Presumably, genocide in Ukraine isn't the uniting goal, although it does seem to be shockingly popular in Russia. He lists xenophobic sentiment, Russia for Russians, the separatist tendencies of minority ethnic groups in Russia, and the transformation of the republics of Russia into full-fledged states as driving factors of disintegration. Mathematician Georgy Malinetsk said that the collapse of Russia will happen because of the large economic gap between different regions of Russia, the complexity of communications between different regions of the country because of infrastructure weakness, the breakdown of generations through conflict, and the strengthening of the power of local regional leaders. As you can see in Chechnya, pressure is increased on the weak joints of the Russian Federation. There is nothing about this war or the economic collapse that would indicate there will ever be a turnaround. So it's fair to say that the game is over for the Russian Federation. There will be more power jockeying and more people falling out of windows, but we're watching not the death of the Putin regime, but the morbid process of the corpse starting to bloat with decomposition gas. Dmitry Medvedev said, if we fail to consolidate the elite, Russia may disappear as a single state. Opening the disintegration of the Union may seem like a matinee and a kindergarten compared to the state collapse in modern Russia. In 2011, during a meeting of the Government Commission for the Development of the North Caucasus Federal District, Vladimir Putin said that if the Caucasus were to suddenly leave Russia, if this happens, then at the same moment, not even an hour, but a second, there will be those who will want to do the same with other territorial entities of Russia. And it will be a tragedy that will affect every citizen of Russia without exception. That leaves the 700 megaton question. What will happen to all the nukes? Personally, I feel most are already useless. They probably kept a few going, and you only need a few, of course, to kill us all. But I think the delivery systems and weapons are probably as effective as their traditional military turned out to be. Putin bragged that Russia was now in possession of several new classes of nuclear weapons. Putin has become as credible as Baghdad Bob, however, and our old friend mutually assured destruction is still hanging around. Nukes are hugely expensive to maintain. You don't just stick a nuke in a silo and wait to push a button. No new nuclear weapons have been developed by the United States since 1992. Even its newest weapons are 30 years old. Aging weapons can fail or act unpredictably in a number of ways. The high explosives that make up their fissile material can chemically degrade. Their electronic components can suffer from decay and moisture. Their radioactive plutonium and uranium cores are potentially unreliable. And the isotopes used by thermonuclear weapons may be chemically unstable as well. Each different weapon in a nuclear stockpile requires routine maintenance, periodic repair, replacement of limited life components, and surveillance in order to ensure continued safety and effectiveness. I don't think they're doing this in Russia. They didn't even have winter uniforms. So as Putin plays out his version of the Führer bunker, we'll have to keep an eye on those nukes. As we suddenly have nuclear armed Turkmenistan. I don't think those states want nukes. I believe whatever they have will be quickly decommissioned in exchange for cash and trade. What is left of Russia will retain some weapons for old time's sake, but this is the end of Russian Empire after 100 years. Blyat. So I guess that's it for this time. We'll see you next time, if there is a next time.